we're really going to dive into what resources are available to help us understand if the products that we're considering meet the needs for our students and staff and communities. So as we go here, we really want to make that connection that in order to achieve our vision that you set for your students and your staff, you really need to know about the quality and the components of the products and how to figure out what is the best selection for you. So as we start, we're going to start with a common place that many of you start to look at. And I think this is a great grounding point for understanding the alignment of materials to our Texas pre-kindergarten guidelines. So we're going to start off with our state Board of Education reports that happen as a response to the different proclamations. So always beginning here, it helps to understand what is the alignment of standards of our Texas pre-kindergarten guidelines and how well do the materials align with those guidelines. Texas pre-kindergarten guidelines are done a little bit differently, in which we actually have a score for each of the domains. In your handout, we were provided a link to the page, and I'm going to go to this TEA page in just a moment and show you how to navigate and find some additional reports that are actually very useful in your selection process. So as you begin, one of the things to start with is understanding the alignment. And I saw this mentioned a lot in the chat about having that alignment. Things to consider that if there are domains that maybe don't meet 100%, what are the pieces that you also have in place? So looking for a complete resource that helps to meet the guidelines, but you may be utilizing different components to ensure that you're meeting the needs of your students and staff. So starting here, these adopted materials, this is just a snapshot of the list. I'll go to the actual page in just a few minutes, but I want to call out some reports that we're going to take a look at. So here's the list of the adopted instructional materials. The State Board of Education voted and verified this list or ratified this list in November. And these are the products that will be available in our state ordering system, or EMAT, if you're familiar, for users to be able to submit requisitions in which we directly work to pay publishers through that process. And I can talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. Some other reports that are actually really interesting to look at as well are the TPG not addressed. So if there is a product that you're particularly interested in and it has a lot of the components that meet your top requirements list, but maybe there are some particular TPGs that are not met, you're able to figure out what those are so that you can make the necessary adjustments to ensure that 100% of the TPGs are covered. So that's an important list to look at. Other things that are interesting and important in this process are the complete descriptions, which actually begins to talk through what is available and will be available in EMAT, where you can see the different components of the products that you can purchase either separately or combined together. And there's various ways to do this for purchasing those products, but understanding what is actually available for purchase. And then another report that is really interesting and incredibly important for the use with interoperability is this report. And so being able to take a look at and understand what are your technology needs in your district and making sure that you're able to access those. So I'm going to take a quick jump over to our Yeah, the link provided on your handout should go to the proclamation. I'm going to actually show you that page because sometimes it can be a little challenging for us to get there. So if you'll bear with me. If you click on that link on your handout, the Proclamation 2021 is where we find things related to pre-K. And so I'll show you a few places to take a look at. But if you take a look here and you're seeing this page, if you can see where my hand is right now, my virtual hand, Proclamation 2021 pre-adoption samples webpage, this actually allows you to go into, you do a quick understanding that you're going to just be reviewing these materials for your selection process, but it allows you to go into the materials and get a quick view of the products. You can also see that there's many reports as part of this process with the state board. Thanks, Dana, for putting out those acronyms. We love acronyms in education. So sorry, but the State Board of Education, the SBOE, thanks, Dana. So thinking about the process that publishers engage in is very rigorous. And so they are agreeing to work with us and make sure that any errors that reviewers find, that means both during the state board process where we actually do the summer review of alignment to our standards. If reviewers find any errors, the publishers go in and they're notified of those errors and they're able to make those corrections before the final products are available for purchase. You can also see like any editorial changes. Sometimes our publishers find things that they want to change as well. And what are the components they want to enhance based on what they're seeing from the review process, but also what they're hearing from the field. And so you can see any changes they are making to the samples that were on the web page. You can see our reports. This is a very transparent process. Everyone has the opportunity to review these materials before the state board votes on them, and you're able to jump in and add comments and ask questions. You can also see on here, here's our list down where it has the full list of the materials that are on the state adopted list, list that will be available in EMAT. You can see any new content. So if publishers through this process are submitting new content from the original samples, that can be viewed. You can also find contact information. There are complete descriptions. Here's the report on interoperability. And then you can also see the official bids. And so this is really a great place to start your review. And there's a lot of different information available for products that have been reviewed through our state Board of Education process. I'm going to go back to our slides. Please let me know if you can't see those. And I want to call out some really specific components about what are the benefits of selecting products on the state adopted materials list. So besides the really important benefit that materials have been reviewed by content experts in the field from across Texas as part of our summer review, each standard, so are broken down, they're checked for alignment, but even broken down into their individual components, we call those breakouts, to make sure that all aspects of the standards are accounted for in the materials. And so we're really asking the review teams to find that there's opportunity and presence of the pre-kindergarten guidelines from all domains within the materials. And that's what gets to that percent score. Other things to know is that they're looking for, and they notify the publisher of any errors. There's also an opportunity for the review panels and the public to comment on materials and provide that information both to publishers into and to the State Board of Education members before they go through and ratify that list. They take all of that into consideration to determine if the product should go on to the adopted list. But I want to call out some additional benefits that I think are really important to be aware of for what makes purchasing something on the adopted list a benefit. So all of the materials that are on the state adopted list are made accessible. And so what that means is that you can order those materials directly in EMAT for accessible materials. So if you needed Braille, if you needed large print, those materials can be ordered directly, and that is that's not a cost to the district for making those materials accessible. That is part of this process. Additionally, they have to make sure that they go through an audit for accessibility in that 508. That's not to say that other publishers don't, but this is a requirement of this process. They have to have those NIMAS files, which are important for making large print. We also work to create audio materials that go along with that for all state adopted texts. And so those are really important parts, and the state pays for the production of these accessible adopted materials. And the district would not have to pay for making materials accessible. So that is one huge benefit. Another benefit for adopted materials on the state adopted list is that they have agreed to a fixed price. And so adopted publishers actually sign a contract for an 8-year fixed price, ensuring that they are meeting our needs here and that you know upfront what you're agreeing to. The fixed prices apply to the whole package and to each component of the package. So you can buy things together, or you can buy each item separately. That really is dependent on how much you need, but all of those are guaranteed, and that's in part of the official bids that you'd be able to see. All contracted prices are legally required to be the same as or lower than any other price offered to any other state. So you really are getting that guarantee about the pricing when you work with what is in the official bids and through those requisitions. The other part that's important is that adopted materials are easier to order in some ways. Those materials are available through EMAT. Orders placed through EMAT go directly to the publishers. So when I'm saying EMAT, I'm talking about our state ordering system that allows for districts to access their technology and instructional materials allotment to pay for those instructional materials. If you order through a requisition, then the EMAT system is paying the publisher directly. In addition, publishers are paid as soon as orders are marked as shipped in EMAT. And so there's some ease of purchasing there. And then everything ordered through EMAT is listed on the district's inventory. And so you're able to keep track of that very easily within our state ordering system known as EMAT. And then the last part that I want to just call out of a benefit of selecting state adopted materials is that adopted materials are subject to enforcement. And what that means is that under Texas Education Code, there is authorization of the State Board of Education to impose penalties if publishers don't meet these needs. So they can receive penalties if offering instruction materials at Texas at a higher price than offered to any other public or state. And that's for that materials listed on the official bid list. Failing to automatically reduce the price to the if there was a price reduction outside of the state, if there were free items, so they have to make sure it's comparable and that we're getting the best value here in Texas. That's a really big deal. Selling materials of inferior quality. So if you keep up with the State Board, you know that they are serious about making sure that the quality is high and that there are not factual errors. And the other part here that's really important is they can in materials can be subject to penalty if districts are not provided with accurate shipping dates for back-ordered materials, and also failing to deliver materials that were purchased in July, at the beginning of July, to be available at least 10 days before opening of school. So those are really important considerations about why think about things on the state adopted list. Of course, you're not required to purchase things off of the state adopted list, but these are some really great benefits that help to make sure you're getting valued products that have gone through a strong vetting process and review, as well as some guaranteed pricing and contract obligations to consider. Before I jump into, I'm just going to take a quick look and see on questions before I move on to some other resources. There is I'll just say there's a quick question about, is the state intending to update the pre-kindergarten guidelines, and what would that mean for the purchase of instructional materials? So I will share, I don't have specific knowledge that there is a plan right now to update the pre-kindergarten guidelines and make those adjustments. I'm sure a little bit later you can ask Tamala a little bit more of those questions, but really with the pre-kindergarten guidelines, we try very hard to make sure that we're not making, we want to respond to the needs, but we also want to make sure that we're reasonable in what we're requiring of districts or putting out there as changes that need to be, that would be impacted by financial responsibility. So that's not on a list that I've seen of any updates. So purchasing now would allow for you to meet the guidelines that you need to. And then I'm going to go ahead and move into some more resources and something maybe you're less familiar with. So most of us are familiar with those state. Maybe you haven't seen all those reports, but hopefully I've introduced you to a couple new ideas that you haven't seen yet from that list on the Proclamation 2021 site. I encourage you to continue to look through those. And if you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask the team. So jumping into one of our newest resources available that we're really excited about to share with you today is the Texas Resource Review. The Texas Resource Review is intended to assist districts in selection of high quality instructional materials. It is designed in a way to provide comprehensive and user-friendly information about the quality of instructional materials. And so our State Board of Education, our state adopted list, is looking for that strong alignment. And now the Texas Resource Review takes some additional steps to really look at quality. I'm going to spend some time helping you understand a little bit more, since this is a newer process, but there may be some people on here who participate as reviewers and help to contribute to the rubric. So we'll jump into that a little bit more. But we really want to focus in on understanding this tool and how it might assist you in learning more if products meet those requirements that you wrote down for yourself and match your vision. So to start off, just to understand a little bit more about the information that's presented on the Texas Resource Review, I'm going to go back just for a moment. On the bottom of the slide is the URL address, texasresourcereview.org. We'll be jumping off to that site in just a minute, but just in case you wanted to take a look at that, you also have the link in your handout. To talk a little bit more about how what happens with the reviews is I just want to share that all instructional materials that are submitted for the quality reviews go through that alignment process to determine that percent of our standards coverage. So everything does that, whether it's on the adopted list finally or present on the Texas Resource Review, everything must go through that alignment piece. And then it goes through an additional extensive review for quality, in which reviewers are collecting evidence to determine how well standards are met. The result is a view of different important sections. This is dependent on the content and the grade level. You can see the information in various views. So you can see on this page, it can show like a percentage of meeting the criteria in the different sections, but there's much more details in the evidence, and I'll be showing you how to really investigate these reports in detail and be able to use those to make your decisions. I want to just spend a little time helping you understand the overview of the process so that you know the extent. I think many of you are aware of our state review process, in which we have an application for experts and educators and teachers, leaders, even community members to participate in the State Board of Education review to do the alignment. For the Texas Resource Review, this is a longer process. It typically takes anywhere from 4 to 6 months to complete the review cycle, plus there's additional time involved in the rubric. But just to share how this process works is that TA begins by identifying a specific content review. So if you didn't know this, pre-K products really have not been reviewed for quality across the nation all that much. And so this is actually a pretty new process. There are some other states who have engaged in this, but I feel like we are on the cutting edge of putting out some information. But we start with determining what is it that the field is interested, what's an upcoming proclamation, what is it that people want to purchase, that they want to define quality. Typically in a local adoption process, you probably are creating some sort of rubric. But what we've done is created a statewide rubric. I'll talk a little bit about that production later. But that is how all of the processes begin. And that rubric development is extensive and involves a lot of different stakeholders from across the state. Once those rubrics are in place and we are going to begin a review cycle, we recruit and select and train a diverse team of Texas educators. Everyone on these review teams are from Texas. They include teachers and administrators that have expertise in that particular content area and have worked in that content area to serve as reviewers. This is a very rigorous process for selection, and only about 10% of applicants actually become reviewers. So it really is an extensive process to find very qualified reviewers to engage in a lot of time that they're committing to investigate materials to provide you evidence and information to use during the selection process. Once those reviewers have been trained on how to use the rubrics and collect evidence and begin to really dive into the instructional materials, they spend hundreds of hours reviewing and evaluating materials. And what they do is they look at each of the sections and indicators, they collect evidence to determine if the product either meets partially meets or does not meet the particular indicator, to provide that information to you. But the other thing that's in there is, regardless of what the score would be for meets, partially meets, or does not meet, there's a lot of information about what is present in the materials. And even for a product that partially meets, there may be a lot of aspects of the product that you are finding helpful and match some of your criteria. Once those reviews have happened and they've gone through all the indicators, the review teams draft a review that they present to the publishers and to our ESC partners. And so our educational service centers have some members that participate in verifying and validating the reviews to ensure that the reports have evidence that supports the score. So we want to have an extra layer that validates these reports. During this time as well, publishers are going through and they're able to review those reports and have an opportunity to submit where they think there could be errors, something the reviewers missed, where there are opportunities for the reviewers to go back and take a look. This is an appeals process. We also do allow for publishers to look at those draft reports and say, oh, well, we would like to actually add some additional pieces based on this. And they can have some, they can add new content that can be re-reviewed as part of this process too. We want to make this an opportunity to engage and help both publishers understand what the field is asking for and meet those demands in a way that supports what you're looking for as you select materials. Once that appeals process is complete, those reports are published on our Texas Resource Review site, and they're available for public use. And I'm going to spend some time talking through some reports in just a minute. So if you'll just hold on, I want to make sure that I'm explaining more about the rubric so that you understand how we get to those reports. As we jump in, I'm going to take a quick pause, make sure if we have any questions. Please, team, let me know if we do. Yeah. I do have, I'm going to jump in and talk more about the reports in just a moment. And then I'm going to answer some of these things about the rubrics that are coming up in the questions. So what I think is really important, and probably many of you already have been doing this to some degree, is starting with a rubric, really defining what matters for pre-K students. And if we think back to what we were talking about for our requirements, you're probably making a rubric for your review teams to go through and review products. What I'd just like to share and what we've heard from the field is the time it takes to really thoroughly investigate those products and be able to understand all the components. It's very time consuming, and many people just don't have the capacity to spend hundreds of hours. And so really the legislation in 2017 also acknowledged this by putting forth this task of TEA to work with independent reviewers to provide the information. Instead of having 1,200 districts across the state replicate the same process, wouldn't it be nice to be able to view reports and evidence in a way that is the collective of what we've said is important in Texas? And so you can spend time on really analyzing those reviews, understanding the information that's available from the state board to the Texas Resource Review to make your selections. And so that's really what the Texas Resource Review is all about. I'm going to talk a little bit about the rubrics, and I'm going to jump back out to our site so that you can see how do you find some of this information. So team, let me know if we can't see. I'm on the Texas Resource Review site. If you haven't been here, again, texasresourcereview.org. And what I want to show you is a little bit more about our rubric creation. So I'm coming over to the navigation bar where it says about TRR if you are following along with us. And I'm going to go to rubric development. On here is some important information. What I want to call out about the rubric development before I go into all the rubrics is how rubrics are constructed. And so we have 3 phases of the development of our Texas Resource Review rubrics. TEA works with content experts, both within the agency and in the field, to draft an initial rubric. And we gather feedback from Texas educators through a working group session to help to develop those rubrics and draft what that could look like. This process engages experts in the field to come together and say, what is it about instructional materials that we want to look for to make sure are present that we know is important for pre-kindergarten. And so this is the start of any rubric development. From there, TEA revises what they hear from the public, and the rubric gets revised. There's additional public comments where the rubric is available for anybody to comment on. And then we hold some additional working sessions. We try to work with both educators and the publishing field to make sure that we are reviewing all comments and incorporating what is collectively from the state that makes sure that we are representing what you're wanting for quality. Once that's complete, we finalize a rubric and put it on our site and hold it constant so that publishers also know and understand what we're asking for in the field as a collective voice from the state. And so this is an extensive process. It usually takes about 6 months to construct rubrics. And I'm really excited to share with you, if you haven't seen all these, we have several rubrics now available for materials for us to review. We have our English language arts. You can see our pre-K systems that we're going to take a look at in a minute. I would encourage you to go ahead and start, click on there, and so you have it up so we can talk about it. We have a foundational literacy rubric, a mathematics one, and then super exciting, there is the development of the Spanish rubrics. And these Spanish, this is really we're navigating a new realm here where we're reviewing Spanish materials for quality. There aren't, we haven't seen this out in the field nationally. And so we're really excited. Products are being reviewed right now. So we're going to be talking about the English version of all the pre-K products today. But please note that the beginning of March, we will release the Spanish review, the review of the Spanish products that are equivalent. So that's an exciting thing to look for. All these rubrics are available for you to use how you would like. If you want to learn more about the changes that were made throughout the process, one of the great people on this team, Dana Moyer, did a great job of adding to this memo and really helping people understand how feedback was incorporated. We really worked to make a transparent process so that you understand the rubric. I share all of that with you right now so that you understand that it is from the field that these rubrics are constructed, and these can be used in your local selection. So you can use them to evaluate materials. You can use them however you would like, maybe make some adjustments to your own rubrics, consider using them in full. Those are the pieces. So right now I'm going to ask, if you haven't done already, go ahead and click on that pre-K system so that you have it. It'll be a PDF file that'll download. So if you're struggling to get that, let us know and we can help. We'll take a look at the full rubric in just a minute, but I'm going to talk about the different sections. The question, I saw a question in the chat of, do we encourage local districts to create their own? That's a decision that I think you need to make as your local team. My suggestion is there's a rubric here. Maybe it's a good starting place, or maybe just use it in full. It was constructed by the field, and so it's not just me and Dana thinking about rubrics by any means. We have our early childhood team. Lots of people here contribute, including our special populations experts are on the working groups and from the agency to make sure that representation is there for addressing the needs of special populations, including our special education students and our English learners. So just for those, if you can take a look on the screen, I want to give you a quick preview of what's contained in the rubric, and then we're going to spend some time really investigating it. So our rubrics for the Texas Resource Review have some similarities across contents, and then some very specific components for the content and the specific grade level. So in this case, for pre-K, all products have a first section that helps you to understand what the alignment was to the standards, and that is that process of the State Board of Education, and we use that to show and represent the percents across the domains. The second major category that we see is content and instructional concepts. All rubrics have this major group, but this is where it is very different across the content areas. So in pre-K, there are several sections that are really specific to pre-K. One thing we heard loud and clear across the field and within the pre-kindergarten guidelines is that there needed to be an integration of content skills and effective practices. And so there's a whole section 2 that's dedicated to making sure that's true. You can see that the domains are represented within these different sections 3 through 8. And when we get into the rubric, the details within the indicators really help us to understand what you're looking for and is important for the instruction for these different domains. And then moving on to educator supports, there are components of the rubric that specifically look at progress monitoring. Not all products may have a progress monitoring because maybe they partner or you partner with a different assessment, for example, but that information is available for you to take a look at and understand. There is a section dedicated to supports for all learners and ensuring that we're taking a separate lens, that we're looking at differentiated needs based on different student groups, and then how looking at the implementation supports that are available to support use of the materials. The last big category is additional information that looks at this is not scored, but it is additional information for you to have that are important in purchasing and making your final decisions of technology, cost, professional learning available, and the availability of the product in different languages. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pause for a minute while I pull up the rubric, and I would encourage you as well, if you haven't already, take a look at this rubric that we're going to talk about and discuss a little of how to read it so that you understand what kind of information are you going to get out of it. So let me pause for a minute and check the chat.
Melissa, could you just clarify one question we have in the chat about the rubric being used to approve at the state level, and just add some clarification about the difference between the rubric and the state adopted list?
Thanks, Dana. I would be happy to. So I'm glad you asked that question. I'm sorry I missed this earlier. So the requirement for the state adopted list is to look at that percent alignment and meeting the requirements with contract and bidding. In addition, to be placed on the state adopted list, all products would have to have 50% or higher on the standards alignment. However, the results of the Texas Resource Review are not necessary for creating the adopted list, but the State Board of Education did acknowledge how having this additional information is important, and all products that are reviewed through the State Board of Education adoption list or the proclamation also are reviewed for quality. I want to name, because I know some people are looking already, there are a couple products that are in the process of being put onto the site that had maybe an extended review process for some reason. There's various reasons that's happening, or they're in a little bit longer appeals, but all products that are on that state adopted list will be available in the resource review. But the results of the review are not what is influencing what's on the adopted list at this point. So I'm going to share with you the rubric. Again, I would really encourage you. I feel like there was a lot, well, I know there was a lot of time and energy from the field of people who contributed to this rubric. I know there's some people out there on this call who might even, if you are excited to share and want to raise your hand to let people know that you helped contribute to the rubrics. This is an extensive process, and we greatly value the field to say what you need. We're looking to help get the information for you, but you need to tell us what's needed. I'm going to try to answer some more questions in just a second. So if you look at this rubric, it gives you a lot of information. Understanding it will help you better understand what's available for how the reviews, the reports in the final reports are published. So again, just sharing here that there is these major categories of information. It's the content and instructional concepts that varies across the different grade levels and content. I just showed you this overview, but really helps you understand what's important. And we're going to come back to this in a minute to understand how this matches, what to look for in those top 5 requirements. This particular page helps to explain a little bit of how the percentages that are displayed on the website come about. So I want to share again that materials are reviewed within these different sections, and in each section there are indicators. So I'll show you really quickly. So section 2, for example, is integration of content skills and effective practices. Within a section there are multiple indicators, and within each indicator there's guidance to help the reviewers collect evidence to determine if the materials met that indicator or not. Scores then are determined based on that does not meet, partially meets, or meets. And to get a meets, the product has to have all components of the guidance for that indicator. There has to be evidence throughout the product that that is true. And that's how those scores are determined. So in looking at these rubrics, I'm going to look at a particular domain and section. So I'm going to jump to section 5, for example, which is emergent literacy. I know many of us are interested in this particular domain and developing our young readers. And I'm going to show you a little bit more about how to look at the rubrics, but I want to just explain again. So the section is the emergency literacy or the and it's connected to the reading domain in the Texas pre-kindergarten guidelines. Within that section, there are 7 indicators that contribute to the overall percent score of meeting this, this section. And so each indicator, so 5.1, for example, really looks at that the materials provide opportunities for students to develop oral language skills, including authentic text conversations. To meet for instructional materials to meet that indicator completely, all of these guidance points have to be present throughout the materials, and the evidence has to be provided from the reviewers to determine that it meets. If the product meets this indicator, it would receive a score of 4 or meets. If it has components of it and there's evidence that is aligned to this indicator, but maybe not all of the guidance, it would be a partially meets, and in this case, a 2. And if there is not evidence here, or the evidence does not meet this indicator at all, it would receive a 0, probably because it's not present or there's not strong evidence. That's the scoring part. So as you look at the rubric, what we're going to spend some time diving into right now is really understanding what's in the rubric and how deep did the reviewers go into looking into aspects of emergent literacy, for example. So we're going to take a moment, and I'd like for us to spend 5 minutes investigating this rubric. And I want you to then think about what on your top requirements, what are the sections that connect to these top requirements that I want to pay a specific attention to. So I saw several people putting numeracy in there. So really looking at section 7 and investigating the indicators for section 7 to know what kind of information does the rubric help to pull out, so I can see if it supports with students' development of numeracy. So let's take 5 minutes for you to start exploring the rubric, and we're going to monitor the chat and questions. And as you do so, revisit your requirements and see what sections really match up to your requirements. Take 5 minutes to do that. Just a quick mention, you don't have to log into the site to access any of the rubrics. I'll go back to that page to help you see where to navigate. You can find the rubrics up here on the navigation. No need to log in. Go directly to rubric development. As people are exploring their rubric, I'm going to answer some questions that are coming in so I can make sure I'm attending to that. One thing I wanted to mention, there was a question early about the alignment to be considered for the state adopted list. The requirement is that to be considered, the requirement is that materials must meet at least 50% within each domain. However, I know you're looking at what are the percentages, and that's available both on the Texas Resource Review reports as well as that Proclamation 2021 page. There's a couple questions about, I don't see some of the publishers that are on the adopted list. Why aren't they in the resource review? They will be up shortly. Some of them had some extended appeals process for some reasons. If something was up earlier but is down, they might be continuing in an appeals process. What that means is that maybe we're re-reviewing some component to make sure that we've checked everything for accuracy and we've attended. And there's different reasons for delays. Happy to talk individually about those. There's a question. You are more than welcome to take the rubric and make changes or utilize how it fits your needs. Please go ahead and do that. Of course, they are available in PDF, so I know that causes some limitations, but please use those to meet your needs. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how to access the information, and I'll get to that section 12 in just a minute and how to look at information in the reports. Let's spend one more minute in the rubrics. As you do that, I'd love to hear from you what sections really match your requirements that you listed. Maybe you can tell us some numbers in the chat to make sure that you're checking that alignment between the rubric and what you're going to look for and the requirements. So if you can share what sections you're excited to jump into to explore reports based on your requirements, that would be great if you can share those. Tamara, I think you added what sections you feel like you really resonate or align to your requirements. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's really helpful for what you're wanting to look at. Crystal, Shelley, thank you. Really diving into the specific domains, interested in implementation and how to support all learners. Ida, great going into the indicator and really focusing in on important components. Yes, section 11 with implementation, really important for district and campus staff to know of what's available to support within the materials. Great, thank you so much for sharing. Okay. Really appreciate you exploring this rubric. I want to mention again that the materials on the state adopted list, that is a different process in which products are submitted to a proclamation and enter into a contract with the state board to make sure that they have those official bids, and the requirements there is about alignment to the standards. The Texas Resource Review is to provide additional information about how well those pre-kindergarten guidelines are met within the materials and are used as part of your decision making. You are not required to use any of these resources. The idea here is that you have a lot of information to make those strong purchasing decisions that are important for your district, your students, your staff. But again, you have that local decision about what is the product that is best to meet your needs. So I want to stress that there is no requirement that you purchase off of the Texas Resource Review or the state board, but they do provide valuable information in your selection process. Great, thank you for sharing. I'm going to jump into looking at an indicator and kind of walk you through a little bit more about how to read a report and the evidence. And then I want to share with you, this is just a beginning. Tomorrow morning, we'll really dive into spending a lot of time looking at the products and comparing them. So to start, I want to let's take a look really quickly at this emergent literacy domain. And so I want to just share with you and model how I might think about this by giving you a hypothetical situation. So let's just for a moment, imagine that I am a district who has thought about the data and I'm really focused on emergent literacy. And so there's a lot of information in the reports, but I wrote in one of my top requirements that literacy is very, very important in the development, and we're looking for a product that strongly develops and aligns with our approach and what's most important for us. So we're going to take this example, and I'm going to take you through using the rubric and then information that can result in those reports. So let's say you're a campus leader or teacher and your student data shows that students who attend pre-kindergarten are entering kindergarten without some of the necessary emergent literacy skills to support their development of early readers. So as you look at the instructional materials, one of the factors that we're considering is how well do the materials support emergent literacy development in that reading domain. So we're going to take a look at a quality review that has this lens. So I'm going to get started by selecting a report. I'm just going to share an example of a report that's present on there. and show you what it looks like when you dive into the evidence. I'm going to focus right now on this 5.1, providing opportunities for students to develop oral language, including through authentic text conversations. And looking at this particular report, so what I've done is I pulled up a report that looked at 5.1. I'm going to show you how to access this in a minute, but first I want to talk about the reports. These reports are super detailed, so diving into specific sections can really help you focus on what you need to review. So now you can see that this product, it's a quick summary of evidence and information about the product as it relates to 5.1. As you can see on the screen, you actually, this particular product got 4 out of 4 or completely met the guidance for this indicator. And you can see on here, there's a narrative about that the materials support active listening and discussions about books through well-scripted lessons that activate child's prior learning. They support student understanding of the book through scaffolded comprehension questions and a set of purpose for listening. Then you can see below that there is extensive evidence to explain where in the book is an example of what this actually looks like. So in here you can see the teacher reads Chicka Chicka Boom Boom, which probably you've read. I read to my kids lots, to the students during a large group read aloud. For the second read aloud of the book, the materials direct the teachers to ask questions after almost every 2 pages. And so there's a lot of guidance for how do you engage students in the conversation with this text. This is an example of how the rubric is used by reviewers to collect this strong evidence to make decisions about how well the product meets the guidance in each indicator. So I'm going to jump out just for a minute and show you how you can access this information on your own and dive into some of the questions that you're asking. And then I want to preface, I'm just giving you a taste today, and then tomorrow we're going to spend a lot more time in looking at each report. So if I go back to the Texas Resource Review, I am going to go under View Reports. Maybe I want to look at a particular product. I'll show you some compare functions tomorrow. I'm going to look at pre-K, and I can go into any particular product. I'm going to pick a product here, and you can see, okay, well, this product, I can see the section overview of all of the different material, how each section of the rubric and how well the product met. But I need to know a lot more about a particular product. So I'm going to go into the view report. And here's where the exciting part happens. Sorry, I get really excited about this part. You can download a full report that gives you all the details. You could take that and send that copy to someone. You can see the rubric that was used. That's the one we've been going over. But here's how we begin to look into the reports. You can get a summary of a basic overview of the product, which gives you all of the domains listed. And this is the same information on the adopted list, plus some additional information about each section. And it's a really quick summary and overview. Great thing if you want to share those with other people. But now I can really dive into each section individually so I can understand. So I wanted to go to section 5, and I can go into section 5. I can see each indicator and how this particular product did in meeting, partially meeting or not meeting the indicator. But even better is I can learn about this product and see if it really matches my needs by diving into this evidence. Here you get an overview of this entire indicator, and then you really can learn more about throughout the product, how is this particular indicator represented, so that you understand the product really well and can go into these very specific details to find what is important for your district in the decisions that you're making. So I just wanted to give you a quick preview, but these reports are very, very detailed. The reports are long, a whole full report, but they also can be broken down into those sections of what you called out are really critical for making decisions that align with the requirements that you listed. That way you can begin to start and refine your search and looking at materials, because frankly, it can be overwhelming to look at different products and see the extensive amount of information. But here you can break it down into what's important, aligned to your vision, and how is that information represented. I'm going to jump back into here because I'm going to close out this beginning session this morning with some questions before we move on. But I wanted to start you off and get you excited about the rubric and understanding some of the information you can find on the Texas Resource Review. Before we close out for lunch, can't believe it's already that time of the day, we are going to open up for some questions and we'll try to address those. I wanted to introduce you to these resources that are valuable in your selection, and mention again that tomorrow we're going to spend the morning really evaluating products and have some protected time with support from the team here to answer your questions. After you've had an opportunity to learn a little bit more from districts this afternoon and from our early education team and what are requirements and needs for pre-K. So I'm going to pause and look at some questions. Team, feel free to jump in and help answer as we go. Just to clarify, we are currently reviewing the Spanish pre-K products. Those reports will be available at early March. My suggestion is you start looking at English and then hold on final decisions, and especially if you are looking for a comparable or a companion Spanish product, those reports will also be available then. So another question, all the systems that are on the state adopted list, some of those materials will be coming up on the Texas Resource Review website in the next couple weeks. There was a slight delay in their publication. I apologize. Some of those publishers are here to meet with you tomorrow, but we're getting those up as quickly as we can. Before we head out to lunch, are there any other questions that we want to make sure that we respond to? Yeah, Scholastic is one of those products. I see a question about that. It will be up. There was a need to review, extend the appeals. There's a question about when do you need to decide on your adoption? That is up to your local decision. There's no requirement on the state of when you decide to purchase a product, whether it's this year or beyond. You do need to make some considerations with the allotment funds, but that is a decision for your district and what are the requirements by your school board and any other local policies.